What is the state of the Black consciousness movement 40 years on after the death of Steve Biko? What can the current generation of students learn from Biko's fearlessness and activism and the oratory skills? Why is it important to write books about the heroes of the country's struggle for freedom? Would it be in the best interest of Steve Biko's legacy to advance the decolonization of the continent? Do you know what time it is? Ha! Got it right. It's question time. Good afternoon. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your host Simpiwe Ngona, standing in for Mpotse. Now today marks exactly 40 years after the death of Black consciousness leader Steven Bantu Biko. He died in a police cell at the then Pretoria Central Prison, now known as the Kgosi Mampuru Correctional Centre, on the 12th of September 1977. Now Biko had been arrested in August of that year as one of the most influential figures during the student protests of 1976. Kruger, the Minister of Justice and Police at the time, claimed that Biko died as a result of a hunger strike. A 1977 ruling by a magistrate on an inquest into Biko's death stated that, quote, on the available evidence, the death cannot be attributed to any act or omission amounting to a criminal offence, close quote. Now, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission rejected that version by 5 police officers, dismissing their submissions as improbable and contradictory. Now, many people are now calling for an inquest similar to the one into Ahmed Timol's death to probe what really happened to Biko. President Jacob Zuma laid a wreath at Biko's cell at Kgosi Mampuru as part of today's events. We are live, therefore you can call us and air your views on the following numbers on your screens right now: 089 110 4210, or the international number is +2789 110 4210, or tweet us your comments. Our Twitter handle is @QuestionTime24. Now, my guest today is Professor Pitika Ntuli, and Professor, thank you so much for joining us, and a warm welcome to the show.
Thank you, Simpiwe, and to the viewers.
What's the significance of celebrating Steve Biko's legacy on Heritage Month?
I think the best thing one can actually say that here is somebody who is an African born and bred, who knew what was wrong within the society in which he lived. He had the ideas of how to correct these things, and how he, together with those people that he really worked with, wanted to focus on ourselves, our dignity, our freedom, and also our sense of being.
Okay. So what is the state of Black consciousness in South Africa 40 years after his death?
But most unfortunately, with our liberation movements, we are all factionalized. PAC is factionalized, the ANC is factionalized, Black consciousness is factionalized. But for me to come and look at the state of blackness, I can only look at it from the perspective of students. The fees must fall on students, whose first principle is one of Black consciousness, is of Pan-Africanism, and is also of radical Black feminism. Looks like the students are bringing up the whole issue of Black consciousness right onto the agenda 40 years later.
I'm actually glad you touched on the issue of students, Professor. Now, on the issue of decolonization, we may be decolonized, but the mind is still not decolonized.
500 years of Western modernity was calculated and planned in order to introduce the coloniality of being, of taking us over, of who we are, so that we lose our entire identity. We did decolonize, but coloniality, that psychological template of oppression, is there. Even when we rule throughout Africa, whenever we rule, we are going to have a gut reaction, react like the people that 10,000 and oppressed us. The students themselves were saying precisely the same thing during the fees must fall, that the people who should be protecting us right now, we are now totally militarized up at the university. The Nyalas are there, that were there in 1976, and the rest. What is actually wrong, which takes us back to what Steve Biko says, where in Write What I Write, you must at least decolonize your mind. Your mindset must be set to focus on who you are as a black person, where you are at what period in time, what period in history.
That will lead me to my next question there, Professor. I want us to get to the bolts and the nuts of black consciousness. Why is our blackness, why are we conscious of our own blackness?
We have to be conscious of our own blackness, because blackness has been looked at as a word, dirty fatuk that has actually been thrown in there. Let me just give you one simple example. When you look at blackness in America, even in here, when you're in America, you are talking to a white person, and when you part ways, the white person says, "See you later." And when you're with a black person, what does the black person says? Take care.
Take care. That's actually true, Prof.
You take care, because as a black person, you are an endangered person. You are viewed as a beast of burden. But what lies within that blackness is a particular culture of interrelatedness, interdependence, and interconnectedness of our culture and our people. So to be conscious of our blackness is to be conscious of our culture, to be conscious of our history, to be conscious of our struggles, to be conscious of where we want to take ourselves to.
Now, when you talk of being conscious of our struggles, clearly, now we all know that this is the South Africa that Steve Biko did not dream of. Do you think he's happy wherever he is?
I don't think Steve Biko is happy. I don't think Madiba is happy. I don't think Sobuko is happy. I don't think Lillian Ngoyi is happy. We have got plenty of challenges. But instead of confronting the challenges, systemic as it is, our emphasis is on individuals, right? The deputy president has done these things. The president must go. Our focus is just simply upon individuals and human beings, rather than looking at the totality of our own society and how we can change these things from the grassroots level to move away from where the educated think they hold the balance of power.
Biko, being a great man that he was, he turned ideas into a potent new weapon. Now, being the founder of Black Consciousness, Professor, why hasn't Black Consciousness earmarked an institutional footprint in South Africa, as has the ANC, for instance? Are we talking of a movement or an organization indicative of it not being effective, indicative of an organization that is not so broad-based?
Black consciousness, again, is also a reflection of a fear by white people. Let's take a little step back.
Yeah.
The Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania was formed in 1959. 9 months after that, it staged a positive action campaign, organizing a stay-at-home, black conscious thinking. Within that month, it forced the government to ban that organization. So black consciousness was also banned before it could actually put its foot, because blackness is a danger to capital.
Okay. All right, Professor, we'll leave it there for now. We'll take a short break, and question time. We'll be back right after this.
For black people to be able to work out a program, they need to defeat the one main element in politics which was working against them, and this was the psychological feeling of inferiority.
Welcome back. You're still watching Question Time. Our second guest has just joined us. He's a Black Consciousness Movement veteran, Mr. Libon Mabasa. Very good afternoon. Libon Mabasa. I beg your pardon. And welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now, what are your thoughts on the commemoration of Steve Biko's legacy?
Well, basically, I call it a contested legacy. It's not just a natural process that we are where we are.
Okay.
It's that because people have made so many sacrifices to make sure that the name of Steve Biko remains where it is. And it's good that I'm Prof. How are you?
I'm good.
It's good that I'm with Prof.
Indeed.
For instance, I always argue that the same space occupied by Biko could have been the same space occupied by Mangaliso Robert Sobukwe.
Yeah.
But the effort was not as it has been with the Black Consciousness. The same thing in 1994, 93, 94, when Chris Hani died, more than 100,000 people filled FNB Stadium, and you would have thought that he would live maybe in the same manner that Steve Biko lives. But I can tell you, because I was there and I was part of that process, year after year, and people sometimes got beaten up badly, some died, but there was this very determined effort to say we'll remain pushing the legacy of Steve Biko. I come from the cell today, and our message in the cell was the values, the teaching, the experiences of Steve Biko must be made so important that we should not be afraid to say, make Steve Biko president, and see how people will respond to that.
Indeed, indeed. Now, earlier on, Professor and I were talking about the decolonization of the mind, which is still a rather far-fetched concept at this point. Why is that?
Well, it takes a very long time to destroy stereotypes that we have made to live with for many, many years. Other people say the institutions, the teachings that are there during the colonial era survives the birth of a new era, and they are the last to be destroyed. I was listening to what Professor was saying, that it is true that we have to struggle, and I think it's still going to be a struggle to change the mindset of people. In the universities today, most of the students talk about one thing: Pan-Africanism and Black consciousness. Tiro and not Biko. He is the one who had said it's a philosophy, it's an idea whose time has come, and I think that time is now. And suddenly people are starting to say, yes, we have had 1994, yes, we have had this and this, but mentally and otherwise, and even materially, we still find ourselves in the same situation we were before that period.
All right. Let's take our calls now. We've got Sabelo from Nelspruit on the lines. Very good afternoon to you, Sabelo. Welcome to the show.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Indeed. What's in your mind, sir?
I'm calling in. I'm listening to you guys speaking there, and I just can't help to notice, listening to you guys there and the current dynamics that we are in right now as a country, South Africa. In this modern day, it is very sad. We have failed the legacy of Steve Biko as black people in general and particularly. For instance, Steve Biko was a black, he was perpetuating black consciousness. However, let us now look 40 years post his death. What have we achieved as black people? What we have achieved as black people, even though we are here democracy, but a multi-party state where black people are contesting each other. You have the ANC there, you have the EFF there, you have Inkatha there. These are black parties contesting each other. However, when you listen to them closely, you see that they actually have maybe one approach when it comes to certain issues like getting back the land, etc. However, when it comes to them sitting down and paving a clear way forward, they find themselves contesting each other, fighting each other, whereas they are black.
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, secondly, Secondly, let us look at the land issue. Let us look at the land issue. We do not even have a clear model on how to get back the land. You know, Steve Biko said, black people must liberate themselves mentally. And do not see themselves as inferior.
Okay.
Now we find white people calling us monkeys in our own land, killing us, saying that he thought we were monkeys, etc. Now you find that all these things we are being undermined because we have nothing as black people. We have nothing. And what can give us something, identity, and the courage to actually stand up and not even pay attention to these people is getting back the land. Today, black people, when it comes to even businesses.
Okay, Sabelo, thank you so much for your call. Thank you so much for your call. That was really insightful. Thank you, really appreciate it. Now, Sabelo from Nelspruit is raised a myriad of issues, racial prejudices and the fact that we've failed the legacy of Steve Biko. Why is that the case? What went wrong and where and how and what can be done to remedy this situation?
I think there are maybe a few attempts that some of the honest people are trying to do. For instance, there's this process of kind of social cohesion, of trying to bring people together. The Minister of Arts and Culture brought Ngugi wa Thiong'o in here, who's another proponent of black consciousness. The discussion that took place between, say, Ngugi, myself, and the Minister of Arts and Culture focused on the issues of blackness within the whole climate of white monopoly in the capital, as to what should we say to our students on what they want. Is what they are saying wrong to say that we are black and we are proud that we are black, and that we have got to radicalize, in a sense, our own sense of blackness in our own country? But I think people like the veteran of black consciousness might be the one who can take us forward and say on the ground what is it that they are doing.
Indeed, be my guest.
Well, I think it's two ways. We first have to deal with the law, the institutionalization of black poverty and the landlessness of our people, because 1994 did not address that. In the first instance, when the negotiations started, people put real issues on the table, but no sooner had they done that, the apartheid regime put violence on the table. Our people were getting murdered left, right, and center, and suddenly the narrative changed completely. Was that if we can just set a date for the election, everything will be okay. So you are going to the election, you don't have land, you do not have a plan for economic transformation, and at the end, of course, you get the elections, you elect a president of the Republic of South Africa who is not white. And I'm deliberately not saying a black president, because the institutions as they stood would not have allowed the election of a black institution. We had the Republic of South Africa in its continuity, but with a new management which was not actually of white people. And they had then to carry the program. On the 2nd of March, there was a newspaper called This Day, and Kumalo was the editor. Yeah. The second issue, he interviews Mandela. He says to President Mandela, why is it that you had this wonderful slogan, a better life for all? Yeah. Why didn't it happen? And President Mandela answered so faithfully and truthfully, says, how were we going to do that when we were settled with so many problems, and above all, the apartheid debt, which was not the debt of our people, which was the debt of building jails, which was the debt of arresting people, armament, amelioration of white living standards. How could we have moved forward? So basically, there was a problem right at the beginning, and we haven't been able to resolve that problem, maybe to this day. When President Zuma, for instance, stands up and says, yes, we'll expropriate land and whatever, what do ANC members say in Parliament? They say, but the law won't allow you to do that. Yeah. And all those are members of the ANC. They tell their president that the law will not allow you to do that. It's a constitutional thing. And, of course, there are lots of those constitutional things that tie our people exactly to the situation they were long before.
And touching on the land issue, yes, I will get to you, Professor. Touching on the land issue, now we live in a society fraught with misogyny, fraught with patriarchy, a largely unequal society. So some political thought leaders are even arguing that the black consciousness concept is slowly fading away because black consciousness does not have an institutional home. But then my question is, does it really need an institutional home to flourish?
It does have an institutional home, but maybe it's a debate for another day.
Yeah.
I just think that the Black Consciousness movement came into being after the formation of the African National Congress, as you know, the Pan-Africanist Congress, and we were never arrogant. We acknowledged that those historical organizations formed the basis and assisted in our thinking when the Black Consciousness movement came into being. And therefore, it was a positive development. Biko calls it the most positive call to have come anywhere in the world from the black world was that of black consciousness. I do not think it would actually fade away. It might experience some challenges and some weaknesses, which is what in 1974 the Institute of Race Relations, talking about political organization, you know that the ANC, I mean the PAC was put as being more popular.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to interrupt you there. We've got another caller, but before we take the caller, how you do weigh in on that, Professor?
Yeah, I'm just weighing up on it, is that when the answer that he gave about Mandela, when we got our free, we came with RDP, Reconstruction and Development.
Yeah.
Brilliant. What are we reconstructing? We have to reconstruct our economy, our education, reconstruct all of this. We dumped the RDP and we came with gear because we wanted foreign direct investment, which can only come from white monopoly capital. Today, whenever we attack anybody, we attack white monopoly capital when the policies that we are actually being, pushing are absolutely, on that
Inimical
line. Inimical to the issue.
Right.
So if we are black kind of, conscious, then we can deal with the issue of white monopoly, capital, very differently, not just as a matter of color, but as a matter of principle.
Yeah, and we've got Felix from Nelspruit. A very good afternoon to you, Felix, and welcome to the show. All right, unfortunately, we have lost Felix. Now, I'm quite intrigued by one of many of Steve Biko's quotes, and he says that being black is not a matter of pigmentation, but being black is a reflection of a mental attitude. Yeah, now here, we're talking of the founder and the architect of black pride, the architect of, black intellectualism. Now, so the black consciousness movement's focus on being, on blackness as the major principle, or rather as a major organizing principle, was largely overshadowed or downplayed by Nelson Mandela's approach to blackness, or rather on a multiracial balance which is needed for our society. So this leads to a clash of ideologies of two great men.
But Sobukwe and Biko spoke with one thing, that being an African is not a matter of color. I have got my cousin, my blood cousin. When he see me, he says, "Hey man, brother, man, things ain't gonna be that bad, man. Hey man, check me, baby." And then I am going to meet a friend, the white guy, Peter Klaus, a farmer, who says, "Hey, forward. I was in London, but abakhuluma isiZulu lapho." And now, who of these two is African? Who of these two is black?
Maybe I would even go further that the definition of black in the black consciousness by Steve Biko's definition indeed went beyond the amount of melanin in your skin. We could even give an example. I hear lots of people talking and saying, but Trevor Manuel is white. And I laugh because I knew Trevor as a member of the Black Consciousness movement during Biko's time. And they say, but Peter Jones is a Cape Colored. And I laugh again because the definition was not actually the amount of melanin in your skin. It was the way you think about the solidarity, first and foremost, of the oppressed, and how the oppressed together can move to transform society. He says, once you have admitted or you have inculcated and acknowledged that you are black, that is your first step towards liberation.
Indeed. Gentlemen, great chatting to you this afternoon.
Thank
We
you.
really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, that was our guest, Professor Pitiga Ntuli, and Black Consciousness Movement veteran, Mr. Laibon Mabasa. And that was Question Time for today. A big thank you to our guests and for you at home for watching. Till next time then, it's goodbye from Johannesburg.